Story time! Carlo, Jemmy, and Jack by Elizabeth Hunter. Carlo was a fine Newfoundland dog, 3 years old, brave and full of fun. Jemmy was a boy, just 7, not full of fun, very timid and inclined to be fretful. His parents were poor, with more children than they could well provide for. So Jemmy, like his brothers and sisters, was scantily clothed and scantily fed, and in winter had such a hard time of it that he seldom had spirit to play, even at snowballing. Carlo lived at a butcher's and had plenty to eat, and as his coat was warm, he had not the same troubles that little Jemmy had. Altogether, Carlo was better off as a dog than Jemmy as a boy. He was almost as tall as Jemmy. Indeed, when he stood on his hind legs and put his paws on Jemmy's shoulders, as he once did, he was taller. After that, Jemmy was frightened at Carlo, and whenever he saw him in his street would run home crying. That was pretty often, for the butcher lived round the corner, so Carlo was as often in Jemmy's street as in his own.
I'm scared of dogs too.
One day, Jemmy's mother sent him to the chandler's shop for a corn loaf, a half-pound of butter, and other things too. And as he had no basket to put them all in, the shopkeeper packed them as well as he could in the little boy's arms. Thus laden, Jemmy had not gone far down the street when he saw Carlo trotting briskly towards him. He tried to shrink past him by keeping close to the houses, but Carlo, who did not know that Jemmy was afraid, stopped right in front of him and said in dog language, "How do you do?" Jemmy feared the dog was going to put his paws on his shoulders again and cried out for help, trying at the same time to push Carlo aside with the edge of the plate on which was the butter. But Carlo quite misunderstood Jemmy's intention. He thought Jemmy offered him the butter to eat. So, putting his head on one side, he licked it up at one mouthful, leaving an empty plate in Jemmy's hand.
I love butter. It's yummy, 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 yummy.
Jemmy screamed, and a man who was passing scared the dog away. Jemmy ran home crying, where there was a general lamentation for the loss of the butter. Now Jemmy was more afraid of Carlo than ever. Summertime came, and the streets, instead of being muddy, were dusty. The sun baked the bricks of the houses and the pavement of the street. Altogether, it was too hot to play, even on the shady side of the way. Carlo found his coat too hot and lay panting in the shade of his master's shop all day. But when evening came, he sallied out and played with the dogs or the boys that chanced to be in the street. Of course, he preferred dogs to boys, but he was always ready to play with either. Jemmy kept indoors. The streets were the only place that he, and such as he, had to play in. They were too hot in the daytime, and in the evening he was afraid of Carlo. Indeed, he had as little spirit to play in the summer as in the winter, for each season brought its troubles to poor Jemmy. His parents, with their 5 children, had only 2 rooms to live in, and those were underground kitchens, cold and damp in the winter, hot and stuffy in the summer. Jemmy's mother complained more of the stuffiness than of the cold, for in her youth she had lived near the sea, and she found London a very different place. People who live in kitchens seldom have visitors, but one day, in this very hot summer, there came a visitor to Jemmy's mother. This was a great joy to the poor woman, for the visitor was no other than her brother, Jem, who was a fisherman and lived by the sea, where her home had once been. He was a big, strong man, as healthy as the sea breezes he lived among. "Well, and how are you all?" asked he, taking a seat after the first greetings were over. "How's the master and how's the chicks?" "Only so-so," said the mother. "London isn't like the country. There's nothing to breathe here." "Not much, certainly," said the fisherman, looking round to see where the air came from. "And what you get tastes stale." "So it do," replied the mother. "So it do. And, as I say, 'tisn't healthy. Here's your little namesake. He's a poor weakly thing, no strength in him." "Why, he does look as if he hadn't always enough to eat," said the uncle, taking Jemmy between his knees. "I do the best I can for him," said the mother sadly. "But Bill's wages is so small, I can't often get meat for the children." "I'll tell you what, Nancy," said the fisherman. "You must let this little fellow go back with me. A few weeks by the seaside will do him a world of good." "Oh, that is so kind of you, Jem," said the mother with tears in her eyes. "You always was a good brother to me. God bless you." So Jemmy went with his uncle the fisherman to his home by the sea. At first he was frightened at the big waves that dashed in on the shore. And when next day his uncle put him, with his cousin Jack, a healthy, brave boy, a year older than Jemmy, into a boat, Jemmy began to cry. But his uncle said sternly, "You mustn't be a coward, boy. We can't have cowards here." Jack laughed, and Jemmy stopped crying.
I don't like water. It gets my fur wet.
Luckily for Jemmy, the sea was smooth that day, and as his uncle rowed, the motion of the boat seemed to Jemmy like that of a swing, which he liked much. Gradually, he forgot his fear, and when his uncle rowed back to land, he was sorry to leave the boat. Jack and he became great friends. Jack showed him how to dig holes in the sand, and how to float tiny boats and bits of chips in the pools of seawater on the shore. "Wouldn't you like to be a sailor, Jemmy?" said Jack one day, as the two boys stood watching a large ship sailing by in the distance. "I'm going to be one." "Don't they drown sometimes?" asked Jemmy. "Why, of course they do," said Jack, laughing. "My father says we're not to think whether we should be drowned or not when we go to sea. Only cowards do that. Work well and speak the truth, he says. So I shall be a sailor." Jemmy was ashamed of being a coward and thought he would like to be whatever Jack was. By the end of 3 weeks, Jemmy's pale face had become brown and had a healthy glow in it. The sea air had done him a world of good. But his improvement was not all owing to the sea air. He had wholesome food and enough of it. For the fisherman, though not earning more money than his brother-in-law, spent it more wisely and lived a healthier life. Jemmy thrived on the large basin of porridge his aunt gave him for breakfast, better than on the sloppy tea and scanty bread and butter he had at home. "Suppose we keep the little chap all the summer," said the fisherman to his wife. "Nancy's got a rare handful with the others, and she's none the best manager, poor soul." "With all my heart," said the wife. "He'll learn a deal from Jack, and they've got so fond of one another." So Jemmy stayed on and learnt a great deal from Jack. How to dig and weed in the garden, how to climb a tree or pole, which Jack always called a mast, and how to do all sorts of things on the seashore, where they ran about barefooted. He learned to haul in ropes, to carry oars, and when the tide was out, to go gathering mussels, small crabs, or whatever else they could find in the pools of water on the wet sand. Then his uncle would sometimes come down with the boys onto the beach and throw in sticks for his great dog to bring out. Jemmy soon learned to make friends with Wolf, that was the dog's name, and before long they were scarcely ever to be seen apart. Summer had gone, and the autumn days were far spent when Jemmy returned to his home in London. He went back a very different boy to the pale, fretful one he had been when he left it. Now he was strong, healthy, and comparatively brave, not afraid of Carlo or any other dog, and no longer peevish with his little brothers and sisters. Carlo and he became friends, but Carlo never again licked the butter off the plate, as Jemmy was too knowing and too brave to let him.
I guess dogs aren't so bad after all.
I dare say you will like to know that Jemmy went again often to visit his uncle and aunt. When he was old enough to be put to a trade, he chose that of a fisherman. His uncle took him as an apprentice, and he became, with his beloved cousin Jack, a brave fisher boy.